There is a specific region in your brain that lights up when you think about your future self. To your brain, the person you will be tomorrow looks exactly like a complete stranger. When you decide to push a task to next week, your brain isn't failing. It is successfully offloading a burden onto someone it doesn't care about. You know the task is important. You know the deadline is coming. And yet, you scroll through your phone, clean your room, or stare at a wall. We call this laziness. We call it bad time management. We call it a character flaw. But those labels miss the mechanism underneath. If procrastination was just about being lazy, you wouldn't feel guilty while doing it. The guilt proves you care. So why does your brain refuse to act? In 2009, a team of researchers led by Dr. Hal Hershfield at Harvard University put people inside an fMRI machine. They asked them to think about themselves. They asked them to think about a stranger, and they asked them to think about who they would be in 10 years. When the subjects thought about their present self, the medial prefrontal cortex lit up. When they thought about the stranger, the activity dropped. But here is what they didn't expect. When they thought about their future self, the brain responded exactly as it did to the stranger. The neural pathway didn't light up, it went dark. To your subconscious, the person paying the price for tomorrow's decisions is not you. It is someone else entirely. This isn't a character flaw, it is structural. But this disconnect isn't just a biological accident, it is an evolutionary feature. For 300,000 years, your ancestors lived in an immediate return environment. If they were hungry, they hunted. If it rained, they found shelter. The concept of a future self didn't extend much past tomorrow. There was no retirement planning. There were no 5-year career goals. The brain evolved to solve problems that were right in front of it. When you sit at your desk and try to write a report due next month, you are asking a 300,000-year-old brain to care about an abstract, hypothetical construct. It isn't built for that. It is built to react to the tiger in the bushes, not the tax deadline in April. This was perfectly understood by some of history's greatest minds, even if they didn't have fMRI machines. In the summer of 1830, the French writer Victor Hugo faced a problem. He had promised his publisher a new book. The deadline was months away. Instead of writing, Hugo spent his time hosting dinner parties, entertaining guests, and working on other, smaller projects. He was procrastinating. The publisher grew furious. He issued a harsh new deadline. Hugo's response was drastic. He instructed his servant to take all of his clothes and lock them in a chest. He was left with nothing but a large gray shawl wrapped around his body. Without clothes to go outside in, he had no choice but to stay in his room and write. He finished The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 weeks early. Hugo had intuitively discovered something about his own brain. He couldn't negotiate with it. He had to physically trap it. He understood that his present self would always find a reason to avoid the work if the option existed. He had to remove the exit. For decades, modern psychologists missed this entirely. They treated procrastination as a failure of discipline. The advice was always the same. Make a schedule, break it into smaller pieces, use a reward system. But in the early 2000s, a researcher named Dr. Tim Pychyl at Carleton University realized the data didn't support that. He tracked students who delayed studying for exams. He found that procrastination wasn't about the work itself. It was about the emotion attached to the work. Every task carries an emotional weight. Boredom, anxiety, frustration, fear of failure. When you look at a blank page, your brain doesn't see a page. It sees a threat. The amygdala, the ancient threat detection center in your brain, lights up. It perceives the negative emotion as a physical danger. And it does what it always does. It runs. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It is an emotion regulation problem. Your brain is trading long-term disaster for short-term relief. Dr. Pychyl called this the giving in to feel good impulse. You aren't avoiding the task. You are avoiding the feeling of doing the task. This is not an exaggeration. The exact same neural circuitry fires when you avoid a deadline as when you avoid a predator. The relief you feel when you close the document is real. It is the biological reward for escaping a threat. But why does the task feel like a threat in the first place? Because modern society has disconnected action from immediate reward. In the ancestral environment, if you spent an hour chipping a flint axe, you had an axe. The effort and the result were bound together. Today, the effort is immediate, but the reward is abstract. You study for 4 years to get a piece of paper that might get you a job that pays you money in monthly increments. The brain doesn't process delayed rewards well. It processes immediate discomfort perfectly. And here is the part nobody talks about. The standard advice for procrastination is to make a plan. Organize your tasks, break them down, but making a plan feels productive. Planning gives you a dopamine hit. You feel a sense of accomplishment simply by writing the task down. Your brain gets the reward without doing the work. This is why you can spend an hour organizing a workspace and still not write a single sentence. The planning is the trap. You are using a slightly more sophisticated form of procrastination to cure your procrastination. We download productivity apps, we buy planners, we try to gamify the work, turning the task into a system of points and rewards. But gamification is just another distraction. You are spending your energy building a cage for a brain that doesn't want to be trapped. The system becomes more complex than the task itself. You spend 3 hours setting up a task manager to avoid doing a 30-minute chore. The brain is excellent at finding loopholes. signals. If you tell yourself you need to feel motivated before you act, the brain will ensure you never feel motivated. Motivation is a luxury. It is a byproduct of momentum. Waiting for the right mood is waiting for a train that doesn't run on this line. The schedule doesn't fail because you lack discipline. The schedule fails because it doesn't address the emotion. You can put a task on a calendar, but you cannot schedule the anxiety away. When Wednesday at 3 p.m. arrives, the task is there, and so is the feeling. The amygdala fires, the threat returns, and you run again. The discomfort of the task is the admission price. You cannot negotiate it away. This brings us back to the fMRI data. If procrastination is a failure to identify with your future self, and if planning doesn't work, what does? You stop treating your future self as a stranger. Researchers at the University of Michigan ran an experiment. They used virtual reality to show students avatars of themselves at age 70. Some students saw a digitally aged version of their own face. Others just saw an abstract representation. After interacting with their older selves, the students were asked to make financial decisions. The students who had seen the realistic, aged avatar of themselves dramatically increased their retirement savings, not because they were given new information, not because they were scolded, but because the older self was no longer a stranger. It was them. The neural gap closed. The medial prefrontal cortex lit up when they thought about tomorrow. When you procrastinate, you are fracturing your timeline. You are treating tomorrow's version of you as a dumping ground for your discomfort. To break the loop, you have to bridge the gap. You have to sit with the emotion. When you open the document and the anxiety spike, do not run. Dr. Pychyl found that simply labeling the emotion diffuses it. I am feeling anxious about this task. I am feeling bored. The amygdala stops screaming. The prefrontal cortex takes over. You stop trying to eliminate the feeling and start tolerating it. The resistance doesn't vanish. It just stops being in charge. Action follows. Every time you choose to sit with the discomfort instead of escaping it, the neural pathway weakens. Your future self stops being a stranger and starts becoming you again. Think about this. When you actually start the task you've been dreading for weeks, the fear evaporates almost instantly. Within 10 minutes, you realize it isn't as bad as you thought. The monstrous threat your amygdala built up out of nothing collapses into a mundane chore. The gap between the feeling of avoidance and the reality of doing the work is enormous. But you cannot cross that gap by thinking about it. You cross it by putting your hands on the keyboard. Your brain will still try to pull you away. I need a glass of water. I should check my email. Those impulses are the sound of the behavioral sink echoing in your own head. The path of least resistance is always there, quietly pulling you toward nothing. But friction is where the mind is built. We treat procrastination like a lack of motivation, but motivation never arrives first. Action arrives first, and motivation follows it. You will never feel like doing it. The trick is doing it while not feeling like it. In 1968, an American scientist named John Calhoun built a paradise for mice. Universe 25, unlimited food, no predators, no disease. The perfect environment. But the mice stopped engaging. They stopped building nests. They stopped mating. They retreated into themselves and became what Calhoun called the beautiful ones. They spent all day grooming themselves and doing nothing else. They had no friction, they had no stake, and they went extinct. You are living in Universe 25. The modern world is engineered to remove friction. Food is delivered to your door. Entertainment is infinite. You don't have to hunt, gather, or build a fire. The only friction left is the friction you create for yourself. The work isn't going to kill you, but avoiding it will quietly kill the days you have left. The mice died because they lost the will to engage with their world. They had no friction, no stakes, and no reasons to act. You still have all three. When you procrastinate, you are acting like the person you will be tomorrow doesn't exist, but they do, and they are waiting for you, standing in the exact spot you left them, holding the bag. You are going to run out of tomorrows.